Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pretty Passionate Podcast, your favorite group chat where we dive deep into all the things we're passionate about. Happy to have you. It has been a week, and this week on the list of must-discuss things, for the sake of brevity, we're going to split our normal discussion. So I had planned to do Netflix's Sirens and actually finish that up with Love is Blind Season 2 UK coverage this week. But because that would probably result in a 2-hour episode, instead we're going to do a bonus episode for Sirens just to kind of keep it easy on the editing and on my on my voice, and for expediency, because I just, having to go through and edit a 2-hour video is not the same amount of fun as editing a 1-hour video, if you can imagine. So, how's everyone doing this week? I'm noticing the leaves are starting to fall, and while I'm happy for the cooler temperatures, I'm also sad. Sad that summer's over for real. And that means, who cares about the oppressive Georgia heat? I'm glad to see that go, honestly, every time. It's the short days that I hate. I don't have quite seasonal affective disorder, but something akin to that. This was really affecting me in residency because you would be in the hospital before the sun comes up, and there's no chance you were leaving before the sun went down in the evening. So you could go weeks without really seeing the sun. And most hospitals don't have windows and skylights right on through. So you're just walking around in the hospital, and eventually that can affect you. I actually had a co-resident who used to bust out a blue lamp way before this was popular because his wife discovered his seasonal affective disorder. But anyway, not looking forward to that. But am looking forward to the changes in the trees because the fall colors, really pretty, something I really enjoy seeing. And still trying to decide schedule-wise if we're going to do that mountain trip. If we do, the fall color will be one of my favorite things about the trip. We had a lovely Labor Day weekend with the kids, but somehow, even though it was a long weekend, it feels like we needed another day off just to catch up. We had ballet class for my daughter, a play date, lunch, a trip to the aquarium. The kids were singing in choir on Sunday, and so that was an early start even on Sunday. And then birthday luncheon for my husband in the afternoon. And then it was okay, time to, get ready for school, because then Monday became Sunday. You know what I mean? We did let them watch Superman at home, which they really enjoyed. It was very cute, the 2025 Superman. And it's just really cute to see them as they're becoming people, be able to watch a movie that we enjoyed, and we're catching on to more of the adult nuances, but they're still enjoying it on their level, they're seeing someone and they're going, "Is that a bad guy, mommy?" That kind of thing. It's very cute. So they enjoyed that. And then we all collapsed in our beds very early Monday evening, preparing for a short week that somehow feels like a long week. Especially, I guess, with all the driving that we do. My husband and I, taking the kids to school, going to work, we kind of live in a direction that requires us to do a lot of driving. And if you know anything about Atlanta traffic, you know that that's going to involve sitting in traffic a ton. And sometimes I really love the commute because it gives me time to unwind after a long day. I'm not just jumping right into, putting on that mom hat walking in the door. It gives me a little time to catch up with my friends and my family, just kind of an uninterrupted 45 minutes to an hour. So that's how we're able to stay close, even though we don't live nearby at all. And then on the flip side, though, when I calculate how many hours I spend in my car in a week, I try not to do that very often because it would be kind of upsetting. I really wonder because, okay, side note, my husband and I did an episode of House Hunters in 2020, I want to say. I think it's episode 20005, I think. I'll put it in the show notes if I hopefully remember to do that. But anyway, so it was a whole thing where we, during the pandemic, my daughter she had just turned a year, and we realized that the house we were in, loved it, very well located on the south side of Atlanta, not the most kid-friendly yard and land situation. This was about 6 months before I got pregnant with my son. We actually moved to the country. My husband's always been into the idea of wide open spaces, acreage, and also space from people. He works in law enforcement, so I understand the desire to have a little more of your own space. And I totally agreed with that. And the kids love it. It is wonderful for them. It is really like sweet to watch them have this country upbringing and go for hikes in the woods and hang out by the creek with my husband because, I don't be going down there. And just have like kind of a space for their imagination to flourish. So I love that part. I can't take away that part. I feel like we found this perfect place for our family to grow, and it allows us a little bit of flexibility. Like maybe one day we can build a pool if we desire, or even another home, like a guest house or other things. Just having land and space does give you potential, endless potential. But this was also before the kids were in school. So I think now that we know where they're going to be, K through 12, so that we have a long way ahead of us of the kids being at this school, hopefully, because we love the school. We're not considering the idea of transferring them anywhere. I feel like more and more I want to center around that location. Not necessarily be in the same town as their school, but to shorten that commute, mostly for them, just to give them more time, later wake up time in the morning, and less of a commute after school, so they have more time to play. And I think that would factor into a lot of other things too, but I waver on this sometimes, like, we should move back to the city, we should move closer to the city. I definitely waver, because then I'll go and look at some cute real estate somewhere, and I'm like, okay, 1.5 million for a smaller house that doesn't have a garage. Not sure I'm ready to quite make that transition, even though I am a city mouse deep down. My patient today was like, or just get a helicopter. I was like, right. First I need to get the helicopter pilot's license, which is actually on my bucket list. It's funny she said that. That's actually on my bucket list. And we'll see if that happens someday for me. But, I got to get a handle on a few more things before I have time to put into that. One of the reasons we chose my daughter's school is because they have like a full-on aviation simulator lab, and multiple children have graduated with their pilot's license from school. And I just feel like what a skill to graduate high school with. So interesting stuff that I've been coming across for the last week or so. For some reason, New Orleans has been coming up a lot for me lately in a lot of different ways. And by the way, I really love New Orleans. You're in America, but you also get the experience of this cultural blend and this richness of culture for the locals there that is so different from anywhere else in America. But also, if you think about the blend of cultures there and how it plays out and how it results in that unique culture, that is actually wholly American in and of itself, that whole melting pot thing, right? People tend to think of cities like New York and LA, I guess, to a certain extent, when they think of melting pots. But I feel like New Orleans is a very melting pot. At its core, a blend of so many ethnicities, nationalities, and languages. It's a beautiful thing. But anyway, my sisters and I are headed there for a Monica and Brandy concert. So that's one thing that's got me, looking for hotels and booking flights and stuff like that. And I can taste the seafood and beignets already. I mean, if you have not been to New Orleans, those are two things, seafood and beignets, that you must have prior to leaving or your trip doesn't count. But yeah, like that had me looking up New Orleans stuff. And I guess because I've been doing that, Google thinks I'm really interested in some indictments that were handed down to the New Orleans mayor, Ms. LaToya Cantrell, or Mrs. LaToya Cantrell, I believe she's widowed. She was indicted on allegations regarding her mishandling of her position to enrich her then extramarital lover, a New Orleans PD officer who was in her security detail. So basically, NOPD has a specific detail whose job is to protect the mayor, probably for public appearances and things like that. However it happened, apparently she grew close to an officer in that detail, and as a result, basically seems like sometimes he was clocking hours when he was just on a date with her, spending time with her. So it's not illegal to have an affair, but it is illegal to have an affair that costs the city, the government, money. So That's what I believe the sum total of the charges and allegations are against her. And it's ooey gooey. It's an ooey gooey and ridiculously messy tale that I guess it is so crazy because it was so avoidable. You know, if you really get into the nuts and bolts of what they were doing and how out in the open they were doing it, it's like, lady, you are the mayor of this whole city. Did you not think people would notice you cavorting about town, eating on terraces, staring lovingly into the eyes of your boo? And then there were multiple people along the way that tried to warn her, probably him, that, hey, folks are noticing, like, back off a little bit. So I guess on the one hand, you always feel a little bit bad, especially for the families involved, sort of like you do with that whole Coldplay concert thing. I felt really bad for the family, the wife and the kids of the man who was standing there hugged up with a woman who was not his wife. But it seems like in his case, in these people's case, they had a lot of forewarning that people were catching on to them, but they chose to F around and find out anyway. So, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, no one's perfect, of course. I'm not alleging that there is such a thing as a perfect marriage and perfect people. People make mistakes all the time. They overstep, they overflirt, they drink too much, they fall slightly out of line, right? And that doesn't necessarily make them monsters. Where they cross over into monsters, no, I'm just kidding. But for the folks who carry on for years, months, many, many weeks, just the non-stopness of it, how at some point do you not, like, snap out of your little love bubble, your little infatuation bubble, and think about the consequences? I guess I'm just a consequence-oriented kind of person, and I am usually motivated to avoid negative consequences. That something like that, I just couldn't get swept up into something like that long term. No matter how how much fun you think you're having, that consequence is looming in the distance. It's coming for you, and it's not good. It's not good to blow up your whole life just for the fun of someone that you're sleeping with. And then the other option is also to get divorced. I said the same thing during the Coldplay situation. Get divorced and figure out your love life from that point. But as I understand it, Mrs. Cantrell is a widow now, so I guess at some point it was not an issue, but it started out while her marriage was still existing, and he was very much still married. So, you know, more to come on this, but I feel like it's an interesting trend lately in the last couple years of female politicians or political power players across the country kind of being knocked off course because of their romantic affairs or indiscretions in their private romantic lives. I fully believe in people having the right to a private life, but it seems like I can name 3 situations. Okay, LaToya Cantrell, the Fulton County, Georgia DA, Fonnie Willis, another one who there was a situationship with a coworker that crossed a line of propriety when it came to promotions and the spending of money. Then that launched a whole entire, frankly, really embarrassing investigation that I think knocked her off course. I mean, at the time, prior to all that coming out, I feel like people were talking about her when they were bringing up short lists for a gubernatorial race. I mean, I even heard people saying that she had a shot at the White House prior to that. And then there was a couple years ago, a Tennessee mayor, what was her name? Megan Barry, who kind of went down the same path as LaToya Cantrell and actually pled guilty to similar issues in terms of, you're with this guy, he's in your security detail, but he's clocking city hours. What's up with that? She pled guilty and resigned shortly after pleading guilty. I don't think she did any kind of time or anything like that, but the point is, it's interesting that, you know, this seems to be happening more and more. I don't know if it's that we are paying more attention to our female politicians, that we just have more female politicians and power players, or what. Either way. Okay, and then the other thing that had my mind very, like, New Orleans centered in the last... I know I'm saying that totally wrong, by the way. I'm never going to say Nolans with a straight face, but I know New Orleans is not correct. I know, like, native people of Louisiana are probably, like, covering their ears and screaming. So I apologize for the 100 times I'm probably going to say it wrong. But we just marked the 20th anniversary of Katrina and its far-reaching impact, which still resonates and reverberates today. And, for people of a certain age, I feel like it's a particularly critical touch point in our history that you live through that really just sticks with you. Like, I remember growing up, you would sometimes hear older people talk about Pearl Harbor, and they would get this look on their face about like where they were or what they were doing when they heard the news, even if they weren't obviously in Pearl Harbor themselves, just like how that unfolding in their lifetime, in their adolescence or whatever, like how it impacted them. And I feel that way about September 11th. That's a great example of how that, that was my generation's Pearl Harbor. I was in college when it happened, actually, and thankfully not in New York City, but I was at Rutgers University in New Brunswick on campus. And for most of us who are from northeastern New Jersey, we have friends and loved ones who work in the city, we're in and out of New York for one reason or another. So a lot of us were really genuinely terror-stricken, not so much worried about impacts to us, but just knowing how many people in our lives might randomly be in New York City, in that neighborhood at that time, kind of wrong place, wrong time. In Essex County, we lost 58 lives, 58 human beings who perished on 9/11 in one county in northeastern New Jersey. So that just gives you an idea of like how closely that impact was felt. And so, but when I think about Hurricane Katrina, I'm going to be honest, which only happened a few years later, still under the same presidential administration, I can honestly say that it took getting to a certain point in my life to really have that devastation settle and really register and resonate on a very deep level. I think in part it's because I moved. In New Jersey, in New York, you don't meet a ton of NOLA transplants. In Atlanta, which is one of the 3 or 4 major cities that a lot of people evacuated to during the storm, you run into people from New Orleans all the time. Like, over the last 12 years, I've met so many NOLA transplants, and I think that definitely it puts a face to the tragedy that makes it hit home. I've met several patients who were like, yeah, they lost everything and they restarted their lives here, and I think that makes it a little different than a news clip. You know what I mean? And then also because, in part, the media coverage now, even of the anniversary, is so much better than it was back when these events were actually unfolding. I think about how much misinformation and rumors were circulating at the time and how little it seemed, in retrospect, the media was getting it. Part of that, I'm sure, had to do with technology. We didn't have every single human being on Earth having a pretty high quality camera ready and available in their pocket to document everything that was going on. And we didn't necessarily have the comms that we have now and all that. It has been 20 years. So technology evolves tremendously. And with that, media coverage improves. We didn't have drones like that. But there are currently 2 documentaries about the topic that I was absolutely floored by. The first is Come Hell and High Water. And it was the Spike Lee is an executive producer on this film. And the second is Hurricane Katrina, Race Against Time. And that was produced by Ryan Coogler. That one's on Hulu. So the first one with Spike Lee is on Netflix. The second one is on Hulu. And I mean, I was floored and like gut punched in a very emotional way. These projects captured the horror of the aftermath of the storm and the scale of the issue. I think that's what didn't hit me, even with the personal stories and knowing people who survived this tragedy and, being an adult when it happened. I think the scale was still missed probably by most of us. Again, partially because the media just kind of tiptoed around a lot of things and lost interest eventually. I mean, people were still putting their lives together for years and years and years. Some people still never recovered from the losses that they suffered during that storm and during the aftermath of that storm. These projects really bring home the timeline, the response from authorities or lack thereof, and the very strong racial and class divisions that drove a lot of the mainstream media coverage and the response from authorities. All that was kind of tiptoed around at the time. We didn't have Instagram, we didn't have TikTok, and people were not able to just capture stuff and share with the world and get that awareness on their own. Now every person can be like a street reporter during an incident and be uploading footage and live streaming and showing you what's happening. Power outages dropped their comms. A lot of people didn't have telephones because they only had landlines. It's really a 20 years ago phenomenon how poor the spread of good information was. But also, I don't want to just let the administration or whoever was in charge of this response off the hook. Not at all. That's not what that statement was. But I'm just saying, if you had something like that happen today, there would be so many people like, hey, my battery's about to die, but I'm live streaming. And you would have an idea in real time of what was happening. We didn't have that. But it also felt like there was this collective American shrug to the plight of the people who were suffering in this storm. I think it had a lot to do, undeniably, with what these people look like and how much money they had. So it's hard to talk about it in any detail, really, without getting sort of evoking emotion. But I can definitely recommend either documentary if you want to know more about it and enjoy a really well done documentary like I do that makes you sad, yes. So I'm not going to say this is light viewing for you to just, be, eating lunch over. You might get a little down, but it's definitely not something that I think Americans should shy away from, or that I think people should shy away from just because it is sad. It is something that I think we all need to know about, need to understand what really happened to these people, hear their stories because they deserve to be heard. And I also hope that the lessons of how exactly we as a people failed these people resonates and that we can do better in the future. That's all we can do is do better. Big tone shift. We're going to shift the tone and mood a little bit and get into the main topic for today, which is the remainder of Love is Blind UK Season 2. Last week we covered episodes 1 through 3. My intention was to break it up into 3 bits. But because episodes 4 through 11, honestly, were like that weird mishmash on Love is Blind of filler stuff. I mean, I don't want to say that, but it's really, that's what it is. Like a lot of filler stuff. Though there's a few things we're all looking forward to. We're looking forward to, after the trip, seeing how they get along in their apartment. Then we're looking forward to seeing where each of the individual people live. Do they live like a little roach back at their house? And is that going to be shocking and a deal breaker to their new fiance? We want to see a little bit of the family reaction for sure. Also, we want to see the Pod Squad meetup. After that, I don't really care to see too much. I mean, I could skip a lot of the other stuff, the dress shopping, tuxedo shopping, the bachelorette parties and stuff like that. I mean, I get why they do it. It's cute. But so basically, episodes 4 through 11 were just a mix of all that stuff, a lot of filler that I think we can cover this now. I went ahead and binged the episodes right on through the reunion. And so, spoiler alert for anyone who has not seen Love is Blind UK Season 2, all of the episodes, this is your warning that that's what we're going to be talking about. So all the material that happens throughout this season is on the table for discussion. You gone? Cool. So many twists and turns, some expected, some I kind of saw coming, and then other things were totally unexpected. There was not a person who wasn't surprised, including the people in the situation. So I'll get to what I mean. Because it was, to me, an absolute bombshell of a reunion. You expect some things to come up, but never like this. So let's get into it. We left off in episode 3, and that was the cutesy vacation part of their courtship. And so they were moving back to Manchester, is where they had their apartment building. And of course, the people all live in different places, but they all centrally locate here in Manchester. And then we get to go to see where they are and live in real life, or where their families are from. So for the sake of keeping things smooth in terms of what happens after that point, I'll just go couple by couple and discuss what's important that happened with them right through the reunion. I'll go with the strongest couples that I really thought were going to make it, and on down to the weakest, or the most problematic couples that I didn't see making it. Okay, so obviously we're starting with, can you guess who I'm saying? Kieran and Megan. Kieran and Megan were very solid looking coming out of the Paradise trip. I say that because not only did they appear to have a very strong physical connection, their emotional connection in the pods, he very decisively chose her over Sophie, which I think was such a wise decision because Sophie was being so weird. I feel like they're excited for each other. So they're coming off of that trip, kind of breathless excitement. And it also, though, made me really terrified because I didn't identify any weaknesses on that between them during the trip or even in the pods that would signal trouble ahead. So I think for me, it was like a cautious optimism. I was very excited for them, thinking they were going to make it to the altar, but also preparing my heart for if one of them just decided to say no for some reason that we never saw or some unseen footage crap. That can happen because that can happen. But they do make it to the altar. They say yes. They have an adorable reception. And I'm really glad we actually got to see them do their little dance that they were practicing because Megan's a professional dancer. So, honey, she had to showcase her talents. And I'm not mad at that, okay? And I love that Kieran is unabashed joining this professional dancer on the dance floor and doing his part. I love that. I love a man that dances, by the way. Cannot stand men who are like, oh, I don't dance. I'm too cool to dance. Like, no. You're not living. At the reunion, we find out that they're living together, they're dancing, they're traveling, and they're planning to start a family, and everything is great with them. And in love as ever. It's very heartwarming. Kieran, actually, yeah, he experienced a little bit of a glow up. I liked his hair at the reunion, and they're just like this beautiful couple. They're gorgeous. I can't wait to see what their kids look like when they eventually start their family. I hope they all come out redheaded. It's going to be really cute. I also appreciated Kieran he's a guy's guy for sure because he never threw Javen under the bus in the opportunities that he had to really destroy him. He tried to walk the line and not be a bad friend. But also, he did not tolerate Javen disrespecting his girl when the time came for them to have kind of a contentious discussion. So, yeah, I appreciate them. I think they're a great couple. I think they fit really well together. Okay. Next strongest couple that I felt coming out of Paradise was Billy and Ashley. These two were neck and neck for me with Megan and Kieran. And I'll tell you why. It's because, coming out of the pods, they were the first to get engaged. And there was really no conflict that they came out of the pods with. And there were no signs of incompatibility during the Paradise trip. They had a physical connection. They were trading I love yous. They seemed really into it. And they also seemed really intent on working on the relationship and learning each other and kind of mature, right? The only thing that did come up in the pods and it gave Billy great pause was that Ashley works he's said outright that he was not keen on starting a relationship with a flight crew person. Turns out that's exactly who he falls in love with. What are the odds? And initially when they discussed it, he seemed to get over it or seemed to be willing to work it out. She expressed a willingness to even change her career, like change her job or change her role within her company, it seemed. And then they get over it and move forward. But then it comes up again. I guess after they met his dad, Billy's dad reminds him of his apprehension about being with flight crew. Apparently before he even left for the experiment, this guy was like, I will definitely not return with a woman who works as flight crew, which is such an odd thing to say. And it makes me wonder, do a lot of women in England, in the UK work as flight crew? How common is it to run into a woman who is flight crew? So I don't know. But either way, he was pretty adamant, I guess, before leaving for the experiment. So for his dad, for him to come home with a woman who is very engaged in a career as a flight crew member, he had his reservations about the soundness of the relationship. And it turns out Billy Sr. was right. I will say another incompatibility flag that was raised for me was their nutrition spat that they had. So they went shopping together, grocery shopping together for the first time, and Billy was apparently being really controlling of Megan's choices. If you look at the woman, she's obviously not struggling to control her weight. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that one should eat healthy, but I guess I didn't understand where he was coming from being so overly concerned about her interest in eating cake sometimes. It didn't sound like it was an every day, every night thing. And it just seemed like they had a terse discussion, and he's very regimented. That came up. He's like army guy, wakes up at a particular time, needs to straighten up at a particular time, do the dishes at a particular time and such, and very rigidly so. The things that the army instills in a young man in terms of order and regimen and the value of that in your life, it's clear, right? But also calm down, like also be a normal person, also be balanced. You're merging your life with someone. You're going to have to give on some things. But that said, that didn't seem like a reason for them to say no at the altar. It just seemed like something for them to work on, both of them actively, to meet each other in the middle. And with the support of their families, definitely seemed like even with Billy's reservations, it seemed like it would be illogical for them to just say no and give up on what they had. And turned out I was right. They say yes at the altar and, it's all happily ever after until skirt. Nope. The host, Emily and Ben, they turn to them and they're like, how's marriage? They're like, ain't no marriage, which is like a shock, mainly because their marriage only lasted a few months. From what we're to understand, they don't even make it, like their marriage was sometime in the fall, September, I guess, and they don't even make it to January, to the new year, before Billy just basically coldly breaks up with her. Insane. He just, I guess, wakes up one morning and lets her know that he doesn't believe they're compatible and that they ever will be compatible. This is shocking stuff. I had no words. Like, he broke up with her like he was breaking up with some girl he was hooking up with a couple of times and not his whole wife, which is crazy to me. Like, there's paperwork involved in this breakup, bro. This is not just you just waking up over cornflakes and being like, I don't think we're that compatible. Like, wild stuff. What is the matter with you? The other thing is, this never happened in the U.S. Like, in the U.S. version of this show, there have been divorces. There have been splits at the altar, messy ones. But we've not seen a couple make it to the altar, say yes, and then only months later, not even past the reunion, break up. Yeah, that was a shocker. I guess I never thought of that as a possibility after the weddings of they won't even make it a few months. You read about some of these older couples that have broken up, and the ones that do, honestly, it's never a shocker. So for Billy and Ashley, he didn't give a great reason. It seems like it was more he discovered he can't deal with her job, period. And just decided to end it, which is pretty sad, honestly. Like, I don't know what that says about him, but it doesn't say anything great. Nonetheless, Ashley seemed to be adjusting well enough to the circumstances, and he seemed completely indifferent to how she felt and didn't want to really delve into the why of it all, which is so strange. Again, I know it can be embarrassing. I know it's a lot, but hey, you're living your life out loud on television anyway. You might as well open up your mouth and say something that's going to help those of us who were cheering for you understand what the heck happened. And then before they move on, one thing that Megan makes a really good point of is that, like, he's holding her feet to the fire about this career that he knew about going into their marriage. And meanwhile, he is active duty Army, which means he can be deployed for months at a time, for a year probably. Well, I don't know what their deployment tempo is or what the schedule usually is for the British Army, but ultimately he can be assigned to someplace and leave her for 90 days straight. He's over here complaining about the possibility of her leaving and being gone for 3 days and coming back and tired and then only being around for 2 days before she has to turn around and do it over again. And the hypocrisy is not lost on Megan, and I honestly wish she had pointed that hypocrisy out a little bit louder and earlier on camera so we could see him actually try to make an argument against what she was saying. At this point, it was kind of a moot point, but still worth saying. Anyway, the showdown that they had, interestingly, brought the host, Emily, to tears. I get it because it could probably be a little hard to see such a thing happen to a marriage, especially a marriage that you believed in on any level. It was surprising to me because British people tend to be very buttoned up emotionally. They don't tend to wear the emotions on their sleeves. So for the host to actually be holding back tears and drying tears that were falling, I was actually pretty surprised, but I get it. Next couple up, Jed and Barda. Barda, that's how he says it. Okay, so these two were next highest on my list of couples who would likely make it to the altar because they shared that similar ethnic background and a similar family structure and family values in terms of how they want their family to be a part of their life, right? And I thought that's the stuff, that's the stuff that makes for a successful relationship. It really does. But then there was a major red flag for me when it came to gender roles. They seemed to very early on, butt heads a little bit. And I thought if he showed himself, especially back in Manchester, I thought if he showed himself to be a responsible adult human being who she can count on, right? That it would soften a little bit of Barda's resolve to be like, I am woman, hear me roar. She makes the point that like her whole life she's been taking care of herself. She moved to the UK from Kosovo at a young age, fleeing war and conflict. So there's trauma there, I'm sure. And she also has this reaction to her Albanian culture that she sees women kind of powerless and giving over their lives to their husbands and to the roles of motherhood. And she's kind of bristles at that and has decided to live her life entirely differently. And that involves being a boss herself. And she loves like making her own money and living on her own and taking care of herself. In fact, she asserts that she doesn't want a man to pay her way. She doesn't want a man to pay for dinner. She doesn't want any of that. And they had their first fight over her insisting on picking up the check when they went out to dinner. That night he'd told her, I really want to pay for dinner, okay, tonight. Like they'd been splitting it or taking turns, but this time he was like, I really want to treat you. And for some reason, she could not just keep her credit card in her wallet. They had a big fight over that. And I really would love to sit down with her just over like some tea and say like, but what really is wrong with a man taking care of a woman? And I don't mean like, please erase all your images of gold digger stuff or whatever it is, that people tend to think of negatively when they think of a man taking care of a woman. I mean, what is wrong with a husband caring for his wife, treating his wife, spoiling his wife? Does it mean she can't work? No, he never said that. Does it mean she can't still continue to make her own money and be largely in control of her own finances? I don't believe he ever said that was an issue either. I mean, how does having a husband who actually cares for you and takes care of you in any way diminish your independence or spell that you are going to lose your independence? Obviously, you're blending your life with someone. You're becoming accountable to another human being. So that will have its impact. But I just didn't get what she was like so ardently holding on for. I mean, isn't that the whole reason why you joined the experiment, was to find a good man who would match your gangster in terms of work and just trying to build a life? I don't know. All in all, that being their first real moment of tension and the fact that they still didn't resolve it, like they both still seem to have their strong personal opinions on the topic, I did not have the highest hopes for them at the altar. I actually thought Jed was going to say no. So I was a little surprised when Barda was the one who said no first. And interestingly, unlike a lot of couples who arrive at the altar and get to a no, they seemed interested in continuing to date outside of the experiment. But he was very clearly wounded, very embarrassed, but willing to still date. So, okay, at the reunion, they share that they dated all of 3 weeks before it all fell apart. So clearly there is an incompatibility issue here that they just didn't catch in the pods in paradise, and maybe even in the apartment. It didn't show itself until that argument. So Barda is living in Dubai, honey, living her best life. She seems really happy, and she almost gives the glow of someone who is in a happy relationship. She never says that, but it just gives an attitude of like, I've moved on, I've got a new man, and he's more in line with how I wanted to live my life. So Jed, on the other hand, he seemed like he was still sad about it, or still upset about it. He's moved on and he's obviously not trying to be with her, but he still had an air of sadness about him that was different from hers. And she was more pooping on him, very much, actually, than he was digging at her. So, maybe there's more to the story than we know, but for those of us on the outside, Barda, it just looks like you got pissed that this guy tried to take care of you, which I can understand why for him that is a confusing thing to deal with. So, next couple, Cal and Sarova. Okay. These two were so cute together for me. Like, I got over his excessively whitened teeth and started to really enjoy them together as a couple. I could picture them together and having these beautiful, adorable children. I thought once they got back to the UK that their biggest hurdle was going to be the family thing, because remember, he's half Pakistani and British, and she is Indian, and usually Indian and Pakistani households don't mix like that because of the ethnic clashes that have been happening over the years. So once they got past that, and once they got past her mother's initial resistance to sort of learning in the 9th inning about her daughter's engagement, that was smoothed over. I was like, oh, okay, so that was it. I thought that would break them up. The families are in agreement. What obstacles do they have? Nothing was ever like presented as an issue up front. Now, there were two things that he did say that were like, again, kind of maybe pink flags for me. He would make these little comments about him being so good looking, which, I mean, he's a good looking guy, but I mean, I was like, calm down, okay? You're not, I mean, I guess maybe UK good looking, he's exceptional, but I think he has an amazing physique. He's tall, he takes good care of his body, and he has blue eyes in a very tan face. So yes, I understand why he might be a sensation for some, but I think he was just a little bit too like, well, aren't you lucky? Look at me, kind of with the jokes to her, as if like Sarova is dog food. And I was like, she's stunning. What are you talking about? I guess you know how the saying, behind every joke there's some truth. The jokes, the couple times he said it, maybe 2 or 3 times, and he alluded to something of that nature, it felt as though he really believed that she was lucky to have him and that maybe he was cuter than her, which I'm just saying, in my opinion, it's a no, but you know, to each their own. Okay. So the other pink flag was, I think he said it first when he was talking to his brother about their relationship. He said it multiple times, something about the fact that I don't want to do this, and then 6 months later just have to walk away, or 6 months later it's done. And he said it enough times that obviously I remember it, and I remember wondering what is 6 months about? Like, why is he suddenly like so obsessed with the idea that their relationship 6 months later will somehow just like self-destruct, implode, disappear? What is the issue? And I couldn't quite figure it out, but I just wrote it off as just maybe him just arbitrarily saying 6 months as just a marker of a relationship that was never meant to be. Well, they didn't make it 3 months into their marriage. At the reunion, we learn, they ask them, how's the marriage going? And Sarova's like, what marriage? And I thought she was joking for a second. I swore she was joking. For both Sarova and Ashley being dumped by their husband, it's wild to me. It's wild stuff. Crazy stuff. Again, that never happened in the United States series. I'm not sure why that is, but you know, according to Sarova, he just like walks up to her one day and is just like, you know what, we're incompatible. This isn't going to work. We don't belong together. And so that's that. Go ahead and finish your breakfast. And like went to the gym. ¿Qué? Excuse me? I don't know. And he's sitting there and he's stiff and robotic and almost a little angry with her for expressing herself and explaining how cruelly he treated her. And that's when I got narcissist off of him. Honestly, the way he was at the reunion, paired with his little snarky comments about being basically better looking than her, or maybe out of her league in some way, and then the fact that he kept referencing 6 months, I was like, oh, this guy probably has not been in a relationship longer than 6 months, and that's why he keeps saying that, because probably every 3 to 6 months he gets a little itch like he's got fleas, and he just pieces out because he thinks there's better down the road, or there's better in his future, or something. But it gave narcissism. Obviously, we can't diagnose someone from being on the show, but there was something very cold and unfeeling about his reactions to her that read that way. But they never really drilled down to his reason. Like with Billy, we identified that he had that one BS reason of the cabin crew thing. It's his reason. We don't have to agree with it, but that's his stated reason, is that he tried it out and he couldn't deal. Okay. But with Cal and Sarova, he alluded to some intimacy mismatch, that basically she wanted more PDA and intimacy and whatever from him, but he never got into specifics. And I think that's very strange for a newlywed, in my opinion. Like, a newlywed man to be like, oh, my wife won't leave me alone is like crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. So, because I just think like from the right person, you will invite all kinds of affection. You might go from a person who, you're with somebody and you don't even want to hold their hand in public, and you don't really know why. Fast forward to your next relationship and you're making out in public. It just really sometimes I think depends on the person. Obviously, there's a spectrum of people in terms of how much PDA, how much physical intimacy you want or require. But also, he said yes at the altar after having lived with her for a few weeks, going to that paradise location in Cyprus with her, and talking to her for hours on end in the pods. I feel like they should have landed on an amount of intimacy that works for the both of them in those scenarios that him saying yes would imply they've already agreed upon. Like, he had time to figure out that she's too physically clingy or that she wants him to sleep with her too often. They had time to figure that out. So the fact that he then only figures it out 3 months into their marriage is like, do you take marriage seriously? I don't know. It doesn't even feel like one of those situations with the US couples where one of the couple truly obviously only came on this show to be Insta famous, right? To go and get that exposure so they can be an influencer. I didn't even get that off of him. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. He just feels like he's just so beautiful. The world needed to see him and his excessively white teeth. I'm going to say it again. Nobody's teeth needs to be that white in their mouth when you are that tan. It looks unnatural and crazy. Your teeth are bones. They should not be white as paper. I'm pretty sure his teeth are whiter than paper. I digress. But either way, he was very callous to her then and on the couch. Sorova still seems really, really hurt, which is understandable. And I think it's in large part the continued hurt because she's never been afforded closure. Sure, closure is not something someone else can give you. But if someone just breaks up with you and you never... This is why ghosting is so harmful to people and people hate it because you never get the why. You never understand why. You just know they didn't want you. Goodbye. Have a nice life. That's hurtful. That's why it's always better to end things and not necessarily tell a person, I'm ending things because you X, Y, and Z thing, but just let them know that you don't think they're compatible or let them know in a nice way so that there's not this open-ended what happened that they may then carry with them into future relationships as an insecurity. I was with this guy. He thought I was awesome. We got freaking married. And then one day he tells me over Cheerios, it's done. And I don't know why to this day. Can you imagine how that, kind of messes with her? So my heart goes out to Sorova. She seems like a beautiful person and a lovely spirit. I'm sure that her Indian prince is out there somewhere. Or just prince in general, because what she's made very clear from the experiment is that she's no longer narrowing her scope and that she's, probably going to be more open to dating all kinds of men and not just the kind of men that will make her family happy. So good on her. Last but not least, the couple that didn't even make it to the tuxedo and dress shopping because they didn't belong there. Katisha and Javen. Man, I don't like that dude. I really do not like that dude. And they kept panning to his mother and his sister. And I was like, is this your king? Like, I wanted to be like, why are you not displeased with this boy? He's acting like a boy. He was not behaving like a grown man. Okay, let me not get ahead of myself. Okay. Clearly, a couple of things. He was not ready for marriage. He might have been ready to have a girlfriend. Might have been ready to even be engaged to someone for a couple of years. But marriage? No. Why do I feel this way? Because of the things that were happening in their relationship before it totally broke down. Katisha made it clear that she never knows what he's thinking. Some people are an open book. Other people are a little harder to read. But very few people are as hard to read as Javen. Even his sister, who obviously has known him his entire life, conceded to Katisha that, yeah, he's a really tough read. In fact, he's always smiling. And the smile is always there, whether he's upset or happy, whatever. She was like, even when he's mad, he'll probably smile. So there's a masking going on with him that is concerning. His sister attributes it to a great disappointment he had in his life, in his adolescence, that he was doing really well in soccer and kind of on the fast track to either going pro or maybe even semi-pro, but then an injury took him out. And currently he works as a health coach, so clearly his heart and his passion is still in some sort of, physical activity, and he probably envisioned a life for himself as a professional athlete. So it's possible he never quite got over that disappointment, which is sad and does spark some empathy in me. I actually dated someone who had a reasonably high hopes for making it to the NFL during college, and those dreams were not realized also due to an injury. And so I recognized when she said that, when Javen's sister said that, how big of a deal it is to a person for those dreams to be crushed. But just like with the person I dated, not unpacking that suitcase full of disappointment can have reverberating effects in your adult life. So it seems like Javen has not fully dealt with the disappointment, and he will probably struggle to connect long term when he is visibly always masking his feelings with a smile. But all of that, honestly, is not why I don't like him. No. I don't like him because of how sneaky he was at the Pod Squad meetup. Okay? He knows that behavior was not okay. He knows. In the moment when he was talking to Sophie and just disrespectful as hell to his fiance, just flirting with her and you're so naughty, you're going to get me in trouble, or however he said it. Like, sir, you knew you were being inappropriate. You knew that you went beyond flirtatious and right on into straight up inappropriate land. And I'm going to put it squarely in Javen's lap, even though I think Sophie is like dead wrong, because he's the one who was engaged to Katisha. So he's the one who owed Katisha respect. So you're doing that in her face. What reason do I have to believe that when she's home boo-hooing in the bed and you decide to leave out of the house without even saying a real goodbye to her and caring that she's clearly upset, that you arrive at the bar and then behave when you are no longer under the watchful eye of your fiance? That you behave. You kept your hands to yourself. You were a total gentleman. You mingled with the dudes mostly all night. I mean, that he still defended his actions so strongly, to me, demonstrates a delusion or something that I find so disturbing and off-putting. Like, what about what you did is correct? Imagine if the roles were reversed and you walk in on Katisha in Demola's face like that. She had an opportunity to do that and be just showing all 32 of her teeth in Demola's face and swirling her wine and drinking her drinks and doing the body language thing all up in his face. He would have hated it. And I felt like I wasn't even that angry with him in the moment when everything went down. It's that at this reunion, you have now watched this back, and it hasn't been a wake-up call for you that you should have come to this couch with a little more contrition. That's all I'm saying. He was still just so focused on being right. Oh, there was no curtain on the photo booth. Nonetheless, Sophie's not your fiance. Why? She's not your long-term best friend that you've been knowing all your life. This woman is come and go. Not important. Why do you need to step into a private booth to have an argument with her at all? Can't answer that. So yeah, instead of contrition, he rolls up locked and loaded to argue Megan down about what she says she saw. The saying goes that, there's 3 versions of the truth, right? Your version, my version, and the real version is somewhere in the middle. Sorry if I butchered that saying, but you get the point. I'm willing to accept that maybe to Megan, it seemed like he was with these women all night, because maybe every time she looked over her shoulder, there's Javen with a different woman, so to her, maybe that felt like all night, even though in between those sightings, maybe he was hanging out with the guys. Maybe he was up under Patrick. I mean, not that Patrick is literally the most solid alibi. But it's possible that Meg's recollection is incomplete in that she was like she said, I wasn't staring at you all night. It's just every time I looked up, you were with one of them. And instead of owning the fact that you were inappropriately grinning up in women's faces, one of whom you actually did used to date in the pods, while you have a whole fiance at home, you just want to argue. So, yeah, I think This is one of those cases where I think after some rounds with some therapy to discuss certain things, he may come to himself. I think this is just one of those things where he's not personally ready. I don't think he's ready for anyone, let alone Katisha. Because Katisha comes with her own baggage about the bad relationships she's been in the past. And she wanted that reassurance from Javen so badly, and he's not capable of giving it to you. I don't want to say it again, but I will for the last time, that although she was not willing to admit it, it is so clear to me and the rest of the world that Katisha chose wrong. You chose wrong. You left the proper match for you on the table. Now, maybe they would have linked up and not made it to the altar, but would she have probably experienced the denigrating heartbreak that she did, especially after watching back Javen's behavior? And hearing everything he said to Sophie in the bar while she was standing right there only a few feet away. I don't feel like Demolo would have done that to her. Obviously, I don't know the guy, but he seems like a real gentleman. So, yeah. And even when they ask him, how do you feel? Do you think Katisha made the wrong choice? He is a gentleman about it. He passes on the chance to basically dunk on her in this moment and rub that heartbreak in her face, even though in his moment of heartbreak, like, you could feel it through the TV screen. I actually, got a little choked up when he got dumped because he looked so hurt. And that 180 she did on him in the pods, she tries to justify it a million different ways. Girl, you turned on your swagometer and you were like, this guy, Javen, sounds like he has more swag, and so I'm going to go with him. And not saying that she deserved to be treated poorly as a result, but I am saying that she should absolutely not have been surprised that Javen turned out to behave the way he did. Why? Because she herself identified how similar Javen was to all of her previous dating choices, one of whom was pretty bad, apparently, and traumatized her. So why on earth would your picker allow you to dump Demola, who is, you're vibing with him, you're connecting with him, you're having a good time with him, and he's putting his cards on the table. He's demonstrative in his affection. He's showing you and telling you without reservation how he feels, sight unseen. And that was the horse you bet on. That was it. That was the one you bet on. And I don't know, her brain, it was like there was a struggle. Her brain was like, oh, this guy's Javen is a lot like your ex's. And she was trying to reason her way into choosing him despite identifying that. And I found that frustrating. It's clear that for whatever reason, Katisha has a thing, it appears, that winning over a guy or winning the affection of a man, it validates her on some level, because she was like, oh, Javen, I'm not 100% sure how he feels about me. And neither of them traded I love yous outside of the pods in Paradise. Granted, in Paradise, maybe it was a little early, but you finally get to Manchester, you're living together for weeks, and there's no I love yous, and you're facing the altar. I mean, strange, no? Especially when you look around you and all the other couples are just ooey gooey falling in love. Kind of a red flag there. But I feel like she knowingly and consciously passed up the guy who put it all out there for her and was 100% sure and all into her and choosing her and only her, just to go with a guy who was not sure about her because it felt more exciting. And that's a dating psyche problem that needs to be worked out, probably for her future relationships to succeed. I'm no dating expert. I'm not claiming to be one, but I'm a girl who has dated, and I have friends, sisters who have dated, and you recognize patterns. And I'm also of an age that I've seen enough to be able to recognize certain toxic dating patterns, for sure. She's definitely the kind of girl who is more attracted to the guy who's just not that into her. And that's sad. She seems lovely. So they wrap up the reunion by also catching up with some other Pod Squad members, most of whom I don't really care about, and also some people from the season 1 that I did not watch. And of note, I will say, what's her face, Sophie? She definitely is not a girl's girl. I'm not really into her. She said she's in therapy. I was like, great, because, but she definitely goes through life. You can tell she's one of those women as a zero-sum game. She chose Kieran in the pods very early on, and just felt like she didn't have to show up, she didn't have to share, she didn't have to be her authentic self to win him, because I think she was forgetting that he can't see her. And so what might normally get her a pass in the real world, where a guy is enamored by her looks and then she remains with that wall up, it just takes a longer time for them to decide that, okay, this woman is not that open and I need someone who is more open. And I think that's why she's probably not been succeeding, is that she has these walls up and uses her attractiveness as a crutch and a reason not to bring them down. The pods would have been a perfect situation for her to actually try and step out and do that. And she alluded to some issues from childhood, home, family, and relationships that are possibly contributing here, and that she is working on those things with her therapist. So I totally applaud that. But yeah, her behavior in the pods was definitely not girl's girl. Like, I don't get what I want, I'm going to peace out. So you weren't serious about the experiment. She was not leaning into the process. So also, not to blame the woman, because Javen was the engaged one, as I said before. But she also, I hope, is going to talk to her therapist about why she felt like she needed to pull the tightest, shortest thing out of her closet and come to the Pod Squad meetup, primed and ready to essentially take someone's man back to her flat, not 5 minutes away from that bar. The fact that she came on so heavy with Javen was weird. I'm just saying. She seems like she's learning a lot in therapy. Good for her. So, that is it for Love is Blind UK Season 2. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It's definitely one of those little messy reality TV brain candy things that I tune into whenever it's on. This is my first time watching the UK version. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Mostly because of the accents, but also because, again, I had the impression that the people on there were taking it seriously. The twists and the turns and the shocking conclusion at the reunion that 2 of the 3 couples that did get married actually broke up was new for me, and an interesting payoff for the season. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think. Did you enjoy it? Are you in love with their accents? Did you see the breakups coming? Were you surprised at the reunion at the 2 married couples that dissolved in less than 3 months? Crazy. Because normally I don't like reality dating shows because there's usually like a cash prize at the end that, to me, makes it obvious that nothing we're seeing is genuine, like, love, connection, affection, and no one probably intends on carrying on a relationship beyond the game. So I kind of hate all of those, like Perfect Match and even Love Island. That's not for me. I think they're pointless. I mean, I can't even think of a single couple I've heard of coming out of those shows that's like still actively together, but y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. But I do get why people find them entertaining. You know, dating, chemistry, falling in love, that mysterious process is so fascinating to people. And I think all the books, podcasts, TV shows, coaches, experts in the world still haven't figured out how to make it easy. I personally am happy to be done with dating as an activity, but it is fun to watch these shows and remember how it felt to be, you know, single, mingling, looking for the one, and rooting for them, rooting for the people that like a past version of yourself can identify with. So, lots of fun. But I like stability. I love being married, and more than anything, like most people, I want to be understood. I do not want to constantly be reintroducing people to this chaos. And no one misunderstands you like a new love interest. It's very frustrating, or I found that to be the most exhausting thing about all the first dates. So shout out to all my singles out there. I feel your struggles. And if you're looking for the one, because I don't think there's only just one human on earth that you'll be compatible with, that's why I'm using air quotes, I encourage you to, number 1, be open. Drop your 30-item long requirements list. And no, I did not say settle, so please don't accuse me of that. I don't believe in settling. And also be willing to do things differently than you did in the past. Just think where our dear sweet Katisha would be today if she had really gone in open, without a long list of swag requirements, and willing to do things differently than she has in the past. She'd be with Demala, I think. I don't know. No guarantees. Okay, folks, that is the show for today. I am going to do a bonus episode for Sirens, episodes 3 through 5, to wrap that up. And although my husband and I had hoped to catch it in theaters, we wanted to see Highest to Lowest, the Spike Lee film starring Denzel Washington, the one and only Denzel. That didn't quite work out as planned. The last 2 weeks have been crazy. So we're actually going to make it an in-home movie night on September 5th when it drops. And so I'll be sharing my thoughts, our thoughts on what people are saying is his last movie. I had a conversation with someone who was adamant about that, and I meant to look it up, but is this his last movie? I hope not. I mean, based on the previews, it looks great. It looks like Denzel is going to Denzel, as he always does, and I can watch that a million different ways. Hopefully this is not for the last time. Oh, because we don't have a replacement for Denzel. Not to, but we don't. We don't, even his own son has not fully, in my opinion, shown me where he's able to Denzel the way Denzel does. And yes, he's his own person, but there's a charisma deficit there. And the charisma deficit for most of these Black Hollywood heartthrobs that I don't know. I don't know where we'll be without a Denzel. Okay. Please share your thoughts on today's topic and like, comment, share with a friend, a family member, someone who you know might enjoy our little group chat. Okay? Thank you so much for listening. Until next time. Bye.